Enjoy. Welcome to Group Talk. 4 shows, 1 podcast from the Small Group Network focusing on topics relevant to small group ministries. Whether you're in a church of 100 or 10,000, whether you're a volunteer or staff, we want to support, encourage, and equip you to lead well. So relax, listen, and enjoy Here to There with Carolyn and Taketa.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for Here to There, where we explore movement from our present reality to the preferred future that God has for us. So I've been looking forward to today's conversation, both because of the topic, but also because who I get to have this conversation with. First, we're going to be talking about a topic that is near and dear to many parents in your congregation, but is also challenging for many churches. How do we disciple the next generation, especially middle schoolers and high schoolers? And those teenage years are so critical, we note, in a child's spiritual development. And we as churches need to do our best to support them and to help them grow well. And we do know from social science research that kids, when they hit middle school and high school, their peers and their friends become increasingly important to them. This is totally natural. It's a healthy pattern of social and emotional development, much as we as parents might lament that. This is normal. So I remember when my daughters were in middle school and high school, they were so much more aware of whether they even had friends at church. And they'd be excited to go to church when they knew a friend was there. And if they wasn't a friend there, then it was a little bit more of a struggle. So when they joined a student small group in middle school, it was so wonderful because it gave them a handful of kids that they knew and they could sit with, and they would check in with each other, and it made them feel not so alone. And it also, this group gave them a place to ask questions about spiritual things, doubts they had, way to process their faith in a safe environment with a leader who was not me. So that was a big plus. I know that for some of you, our listeners, you also oversee student ministries as part of your responsibility. So hopefully this conversation will be helpful for you on a really concrete level. For others of you, I hope you share this episode with your student ministry leaders and talk to them about how to develop these intentional relational communities with middle school and high school students. And also I realize, as probably you have too, that most of what happens in student small groups also happens in adult small groups. And there's a lot of similarities and overlap. So hopefully you'll pick up some fresh ideas from this unique ministry context that you can apply to adult groups. So first of all, let's just say up front, I'm a huge fan of student small groups. I've seen them work so well in our church to just develop and disciple our teens. So I've asked my friends and my coworkers, Britt and Connor, to share with us about why they created student small groups, how they make them work, how they've seen God work through them, what not to do, what to do. And I think this is the first time in 5 years that I've been doing the podcast I've actually asked anyone from my church staff to join. And it's kind of funny because there's been a few that have kind of hinted. And I ran into one this morning and I said, hey, I get to interview Britt and Connor. And they're like, oh, so a little awkward, but I said, because they do such a great job with student small groups, and I know their heart, and they are two of my favorite people on staff, and they're sharp young leaders who think strategically and serve with so much love and humility. So thank you so much, Britt and Connor, for being on the program. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, how long you've been serving student ministries. So Britt, you want to start?
Sure. Well, I'm so excited to be here. So I have been serving at church, not at Calvary for a long time. I've been here for 4 years, but on staff for 2. I've been serving for a super long time in other churches and have really been about the small group context for a while, whether it was myself being one in high school as a young adult, or being a leader to middle school small groups and whatnot. So it's been a really cool moment to kind of step in and now see the behind the scenes for the last 2 years and running our high school program here, specifically our small groups, and getting to kind of just see what it looks like to be a small group leader. And it's been cool because the way that God just designed my life was prior to that for about a decade. I was a first grade and kindergarten teacher. And so it's been cool to see the way that I learned strategies for the classroom and how I've just kind of grabbed those and just put them into the small group kind of setting, and especially from first grade to high school. And so it's been really cool to see what I've learned in school and in college and kind of apply them to our small groups. And so it's been a lot of fun to jump into this season. Also just a weird season of switching over to a lot of digital platforms and whatnot. So it's been a treat.
Yeah. And I love how you have such a learning mindset and how to apply what you've learned in the academic world and the educational field. And you're so modest. You also have a master's degree in education, but let's just throw that in there. And I didn't even say your last name. It's Britt Vargas, if you want to look her up. But being able to apply anything from other contexts, and you're constantly innovating. And I've seen that in your ministry. So thanks. And Connor Johnson.
Hello. I just want to clip our intro and just keep that in my back pocket. That was beautiful. Wow. The nicest thing anyone said about me.
I'll send it to HR.
Yeah.
for your performance review.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So my name is Connor Johnson. I'm a middle school pastor here at Calvary. I've been on staff here for just over 4 years, just at my four-year mark. I grew up here at this church, grew up in small groups here at this church. Actually, just this morning, funny enough, Britt had texted me about making a personal video for a guy who was my high school small group leader here, who's still my mentor. Wow. And it's cool. Today kind of marks a special day in his life. And so she had a bunch of people take some videos and send it to him. Cool. And so, yeah, small group's been a big part of my life and student ministries here at Calvary. But then also I lived in Oregon for a few years and I was on staff at a church for 2 years with high school ministry there. So I think it's both Britt and I. I'm doing middle school now. She's doing the high school now, but we both kind of came from the opposite. Yeah, we flip-flopped a little bit. And so I've been doing middle school ministry here for 4 years. Both of our roles encompass a lot of things, but really overseeing small groups, and scope and sequence, and leaders, development, kind of all that. And so, thanks for having us. I think both of us were talking earlier about we don't know everything, but we have stories and we have thoughts and mistakes we've made.
Wow, millennials who do not know everything. This is super refreshing.
Okay.
All right.
That's too funny. But thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you do have a long history here, which also informs kind of your perspective. But I think, and we've had some transition. Connor, in your role, we've had some transition. You too, right? I mean, and that's part of youth ministry, right? There's transitions. So as you've got a chance to build into your roles and your responsibility, let's start with the basic why. Why would we have small groups for students? What are you hoping to accomplish through those?
I think for me, when I think about the middle school student, when you consider the typical seventh grader, this, regardless of how wonderful the family is and how much their parents love Jesus, they're most likely thinking their parents are kind of lame. You think of a seventh grader, it's like, regardless of how cool they are, it's like, oh, my parents, right? And so they need another adult in their life to say, hey, Jesus is really awesome. I mean, I even think the other day I was meeting with a student who's in my group right now, some seventh grade boys, and I'm meeting with one of the kids, and just literally a couple days ago, I said something, and he goes, oh, my mom says the same thing. He's like, I guess you're right. It's like, wait a minute. Your parents have been saying the same stuff, that following Jesus is worth it, and it's this wonderful life pursuit we have. Sometimes they just need another adult that says the same things that are affirming kind of what their family's bringing them up. So when I think about middle school small groups, I think about how students are pushing away from their parents, pushing away from their families, and need somebody else in their life to point them to Christ, as well as middle school, 6th to 8th grade is where they're really starting to develop some abstract thought. They're really starting to ask, okay, I've heard these stories for so long. I've heard of David and Goliath. I've heard of, all of this and this and this, but why the heck is God letting this happen in my life? Why is, why does the Bible say this? What's going on here? And they're starting to wrestle with those doubts, and they need a place that's healthy for them to be able to explore some of those things, to ask those questions, and to kind of just walk life with, as well as just connect with others. You can talk about your introduction with your own daughters, and they get plugged into small group, and then they're excited about coming to church because they make some friends that way. So, and
for kids who haven't grown up in church, I mean, those years, middle school years, are really when your identity formation happens, right? You're starting to figure out, who am I? Differentiated from my family. And so kids who've never been in church, don't know anything about God, I think they start looking at big picture questions like that, which also then to provide a place where I know, Connie, you guys do a lot to have kids invite friends as they're wrestling with those questions. So it's not just for the small groups are not just for our church kids. It actually is a form of evangelism as well. And I know we've seen that in high school, Britt.
Yeah, and I love it because then they start in middle school, and then when they come to us, it's kind of a continuation of creating a space for students to just really be themselves and ask the hard questions. Because I think a lot of the times when we walk our Christian life, we need to walk around with the sense of we know everything, or that we're okay with everything. And I think that especially in the high school realm, they get to just wrestle with questions. And we always have this phrase in HSM where it just says, we're pursuing Jesus together. And we have the leaders say it, the students know it, and this is kind of the space where we get to pursue Jesus in whatever capacity that looks like. So like for us, a freshman boy group looks so much different than like a senior girl group. But knowing that each group within itself are pursuing Jesus together. And I think there's a sense of community. And again, like when you're walking in to any kind of church setting, sometimes you're not fully aware of, the norms and everything, but you feel the sense of comfortability when you walk in, and you know that you know 5 other people and that will be there for you, or that maybe something said in the sermon, you'll get to discuss it later that week with those people. And including like the leaders that get to step into these roles, is there opportunities for students to have healthy relationships with older people. Right. Whether it's someone they see as a bigger, older sister or brother, or a parent in that kind of way, that they get this opportunity to ask questions without being judged. Yeah. And I think it's really important for our high schoolers to be able to ask those questions, because then we have those moments where kids just start festering things of doubt and insecurity and guilt of not knowing or not wanting to ask the important questions for them to grow in their faith. And so for us, it's like, okay, we're pursuing Jesus together. It's going to look messy. It's going to look different for each and every group. But I love that each group gets to develop their own identity and around who's in it, and love on all the kids in the small group.
Yeah, so let's talk about the who's in it. So you referenced obviously the difference between a freshman boy group and a senior girl group. So talk to us a little bit about how you organize the groups. Is it by gender? Is it by age, grade? What do you do with the whole friendship people if people want to be with certain people? Like how do you navigate and orchestrate for the maximum impact on one another that's positive?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when I received all the groups when I first jumped on staff, there was certain ways that they had created each group. And so for me as a teacher, I had some other strategies and tools in my back pocket. And so I kind of experimented with my own small group. And so what I did is we always have guys with guys, girls with girls. And what I decided to do was create a girls group that had freshmen all the way to senior. Oh, and I loved it because it was a moment for us to have the seniors really step into that moment of leadership over the freshmen. The freshmen stepped in and realized, oh, this is like a serious time. Like we get to talk about the fun and the silly things, but then there's a moment where we actually open up the Bible, talk about Jesus, and really interact with the text. And so that was really cool. And I think for me, just learning from that a couple of years ago was the fact that it works for some groups and what works for us doesn't work for everyone else. Right. Where I see in the boys kind of realm, freshman boys are great with freshman boys and like senior boys are great with senior boys. And I just think developmentally, even as someone who has kind of a background in child development, just knowing that they're in different seasons of life, and that's okay. And we want to celebrate each one, again, create space for students to be who they are. And so what I kind of have going on with our small groups this year is kind of, I call them neighbor kind of grades. And so I might have, usually it's an all freshman group because they're just jumping in. Right. They're just jumping in from middle school. It's a huge step for them. And so usually I kind of keep those protected. But then I might have like a sophomore junior group or a junior senior group. And so they are with these neighboring groups. And what's nice is if a group graduates, let's say it's a junior senior group, the seniors graduate, the juniors still have some people to hold on to it and still already have a connection created from the prior year. So it's been a really cool way for them to be able to see us celebrate the seniors and then know coming up, like the seniors were this to me, were the role models in the group for me. Now I get to step into that to the new juniors that are walking into this group. Cool. And so it's been really cool to just kind of experiment almost with what each group is like. But then, of course, you have those like straggler groups where it's like all freshmen, but this really like sophomore kid is like best friends with this other freshman. And so that happens. But
and I think that you have to keep adjusting and experimenting with it and not having a hard and fast rule sometimes. How about for middle school, though?
Yeah, no, got to be flexible. I love that. For us, in our context, we are pretty specific about sixth grade boys are with sixth grade boys, eighth grade girls with eighth grade girls, and very rarely do we flex on that rule. Especially, I just think the age,
the developmental piece,
the gap between eighth grade boys and sixth grade boys is really tough. And so, I mean, we try to do that. Sometimes we have some complications with, my best friend's here, and obviously we'll flex with that. My goal always is when, if we'll make an exception, say, okay, well, if you're new to Calvary, I'm not going to just put you in a group that some kids that you don't even know. Like, obviously you can be with your buddy, but hey, at the end of small groups, let me go introduce you to the leader of this other group, and kind of like slowly over time say, hey, if they start coming to Calvary and they're like, oh, this is fun. Then after a while going, hey, I think it might be best if you're with, kids your own age, because what we've seen is in the beginning, a couple of years ago, we flexed a lot with that. And then what happens? We put a seventh grader with the eighth grade group, and the eighth graders leave, and the seventh grader next year goes, I don't want to go to church. Right. I don't know anybody. And then it's like, okay, well, we solved the solution for a little bit, but what's that one phrase? Today's problems were yesterday's solutions, something like that, where it's
true. That is so profound. I have not heard that before.
Quote me on that. Somebody else, who knows? But yeah, so
you have to pick your poison is what I say.
Yeah, pick your poison, exactly. So we try to structure it that way as best as we can. And we have also just actually recently started to consider doing a co-ed group with middle school. Still trying to figure it out. And I mean, right now we pause for small groups for the summer to do kind of all the other things we jump in the summer, but we pick up in the fall and during the school years, really when small groups are thriving and going on. But, and we'll get, I think, into this conversation later. I don't know, we already talked about with the LGBT conversation, saying when we've had, a couple trans kids and to go, okay, well, I'm a girl now. I want to be in boys group. What do you do?
So having a co-ed group makes,
that's really, it's been really difficult. And so I've talked to some other pastors that are kind of a little bit ahead of the game for this conversation than we are. And that was one of the feedback we got. They said, why do we do it? Guys with guys, girls with girls. And it's like, there's value to that, but there's also maybe a little bit of a, of a con to that. And that one of those is that maybe this is the best way we can love trans students, is being able to have a co-ed group that doesn't feel abnormal, doesn't feel like weird. They still have a place to feel belonging in their church and ask questions and move. And live in that way.
That makes sense. I think, so the key is really to keep looking at the students that God's bringing you and figuring out the best option for them. So a co-ed one makes sense. And
I think also with when it comes to this structuring thing, when I was in Oregon, the way we did small groups was they were at schools. And so I led a group at South Eugene High School and a group at Thurston High School. And so I would meet at Monday mornings at 7 a.m. on campus with a teacher who's a Christian that went to our church. We saw how we kind of got connected with them. And then, but the goal of that group is very different than what we do here at Calvary, because here for us, a big portion of it is belonging, is them feeling like someone knows their story. They know their leader's story.
Especially because we are a big church. So that becomes even more critical.
Exactly. And so, yes, obviously we're going to open God's word and discuss how this applies for our life, but it's not where we're sitting down and, hey, we're opening, Acts 1 today, Acts 2 next week. We're just work through this because we do want to create space for them to share what's going on in their lives. When I was in Oregon, the goal was more Bible study. It was, hey, we're going to open God's word. And so, but it was just a different context, right? And so we structured it differently. So I would go meet with boys, but they were all ages because I was out of high school, and it was, we were trying to develop a community within that school rather than us. It's kind of, hey, we got, 10, 15 different schools kind of coming together, kids pursuing Christ. So
that's a great point. So when you look at what are you trying to accomplish, that's a really important question to ask. Are you trying to deepen biblical literacy for kids that already have certain bases? Are you trying to be a welcoming, safe space for any student in the community? Who are you trying to reach, and then design it for the both ands? It doesn't have to be one or the other, but we struggle with designing things for both ands. And I think that it's messy, but for sure, I love that. So those are some good questions to be asking. Okay, so we say in small group world that everything rises and falls on the leader. Because really, and you guys have been in adult groups, you get this. In fact, Connor, you lead an adult group. That is lovely. And your wife, Jess, is wonderful. And you guys have a young marrieds group. So, and you guys been through different seasons with that as well. So we know that leadership matters. And I feel like with students, it probably matters even more. because the impact of that other adult person. And we know from research, I think Fuller Youth Institute did a bunch of research last year that came out about how one of the primary predictors of whether someone's going to keep following Jesus post high school was whether they had another adult person in their life, kind of like what you said earlier, Connor, beyond their parent. Yeah. Beyond the pastor title person, but if they had other caring adults who loved Jesus and demonstrated that, it was like a huge piece of them continuing with their faith post high school and then college, which is really sobering. But when you look at the leader types, okay, so we know our leaders come in all kinds of leaders. Yeah. And sometimes the people that volunteer and raise their hand and say, I want to lead a middle school group, I'm sure sometimes it's a yay, sometimes it's a huh, right? So tell me, what do you look for when you look for a high school small group leader or a middle school small group leader?
I think just to start off first with anyone who wants to serve with our ministry, I always look at them as in they're someone who wants to have a heart for service, and I don't want to ever beat that down. And I think when I first started, I always look at it through the lens of, can they be a small group leader or not? And as I've been here for a few years, I've realized that not everyone who walks through our door and wants to serve with us is going to be a small group leader, but it could be someone running our media, could be someone just hanging out with students on a Sunday. And so when I look for small group leaders, I really look for their heart for service, their heart for committing to our high schoolers. I always say, like, when people want to jump in, like, I met with a girl earlier this week and she just is on fire for Jesus. And it's like, I want to help out in any other way.
This is young adult?
Young adult. And was just so excited. So I kind of like threw everything at her and I said, okay, but let's start with coming on Sundays and seeing if you even like to be with high schoolers. Like, because it sounds cool, and you know, to go to camp with us and to do all of these things and hang out.
But you actually like the student.
So let's see if you actually like our students first, or because I know that there are some people who serve who are looking for a community for themselves, and so we want to welcome that and whatnot, and we can find them a space. But I'm truly looking for small group leaders. Are they willing to sit with a student who has hard questions? Yes. Sit with them with patience. And I'm not looking for the person who like knows everything about the Bible.
Right.
But we'll constantly look towards the Bible to encourage our students. And so for me, I'm looking for the loyalty to our high schoolers, the loyalty to, because it is a commitment for
and you
us.
do, and you ask for a 1-year commitment, right?
Yeah. And so for us, if you're a Sunday volunteer, you know, you may come in once a month or whatnot, but for that small group leader role, we ask it's once a week for a whole entire school year. Right. And what has been really cool is the relationships that have been built from these small group leaders with their students is that they'll be with them freshman year to senior year. And that's great. That's huge for us. So for me, it's like, I'm looking for people who want to be with our students, who love Jesus, who love to go through the messy parts. Because like you said, small groups could be messy. And so for me, that's super important.
Yeah. What about ages?
Well, so it's been really fun to kind of look at for us. So in high school, typically it would be like the college age students.
See, because they're the cool ones. You don't want parents, right?
Well, you would think that, but actually last year I was leading a small group, and I'm really not that young, but I look young. Maybe it's the height. I don't know. But I also had a mom, and she wasn't a mom of anyone in the group, which I think was really important and a good win.
Yeah, that's a good thing to point out. Yes, you guys, neither of you have that, right? Well, you don't have parents that actually lead their own kids.
No. Yeah. And I just think again.
Yeah. I'll jump in. We'll get back to you. But no, so we've had many parents as well as grandparents come and serve. And when I got here, there was a parent leading his kid, and I really tried to push against it, say, "Hey, well, let's have you do this." But anyways, I was younger and I was softer, and I didn't. I was like, "Well, maybe he's got a point. I think it could be good." You guys. I think he did a fantastic job. But man, when I look at them now in high school, and that student, his kid in particular, I'm like, he's not connected with other. He missed out. He missed out on the ability, kind of the why of what we're doing. We want them to connect with another leader. Right. And so So yes, I've made that mistake. Sorry to go back to
No, but it was really cool because it was her and myself, and she was a mom of 4. And so she really took on that motherly role for our girls and really loved on them in the way that I would never even thought of, because I've never been a parent before. And so I think that was really fruitful for our girls. They called her like mama too.
Especially for kids who've come from broken homes and who have dysfunctional stuff or have really hard issues with their parents. I think to have a safe person that they could talk to that is a little bit of a mother figure is not bad. But what worked in there probably was your partnership. They had the cool Brit, and then they had the mom. And actually, she's kind of a cool mom probably too. But I think there is something. Aren't you looking? Okay, if you're looking for a mom, you can be legit. If you're looking or a dad, aren't you looking for a personality that is not going to just tell them what to do, right?
Yes.
What are you looking? What if you were looking for a leader, Connor, like beyond maybe a high school student? I know we have high school students that lead middle school groups. What's the rule? Like 2 years or 3 years out or something?
Yeah, I think hard and fast rule is minimum 2 years out, but still any high schooler is really dependent on the student. We've had some
because they're mature. Some of them are mature.
Where kids will go, hey, I love you. You know, you are a lot of fun to hang out with. I just don't think you're ready. But then there are students, you know, I think of, I know you were talking earlier about how when you have a leader that sticks with a group from beginning to end. We had one student who started when she was a junior in high school. Her name's Katie. And we're hiring her on staff, and she starts next week. But because 3 years ago, she started with 6th grade girls. She came back from a high school camp with Britt and the high school ministry team. She said, I want to serve in middle school. And we're like, whoa, she is really mature. Awesome. She led with 6th grade, 7th grade, and now 8th grade. And she just wrapped up leading a group from the beginning to the end.
That's awesome.
So yeah, we have high school students serve. They have to be emotionally mature.
Right.
And they have to really also get some of the training towards them is very different for others. It's, hey, you need to support their family. You are not replacing parents. You are pushing those kids to honor and respect their parents, and not, this isn't for you to be the coolest kid in the block. This is for you to point and teach people how to open up the Bible and ask questions about what it looks like to follow Jesus. So, but kind of back to the question of, with parents, we always need more parents and grandparents serving in student ministries. The prototype of what you think of middle school, I think in particular, because it's a little crazy. You know, I'm this large guy who is really loud, right? And so I think sometimes you think of a middle school leader and it's like, you need more Connors, because it's like, well, you know, I don't care about being, so just I'll do the goofiest things. I'll embarrass the heck out of myself. Like, no problem, right? And if you only have people like me, you're only going to attract the kids that are like me, you know? And so some of the outgoing middle schoolers are like, oh, this is so fun. And all the introverts are going, I hate coming to this church because they are crazy, right? And so you need a balance. Everyone is going to reach different people. My first few years here, my co-leader, 2 different grandparents, 2 different grandpas. And so I got to serve with them in middle school. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm this young guy in my 20s. I got this grandpa serving with me. And that was like so fruitful for me, so fruitful for the kids. And sure, I may be connected with them better because I know how to talk about TikTok, even though I really don't know anything about that. But, you know, and the grandpa's like, what's that? You know, but man, there was some beautiful wisdom that was really invaluable. So no, absolutely looking for parents and grandparents. What you're talking about with kind of the question of what type of parent you're looking for. Yeah, the training for a parent is going to be different. It's, hey, you are not going to be coming into this group. Your goal isn't to just tell them right from wrong. These kids know right from wrong. Most of them are going to know what the Bible says and what it doesn't say. They need to feel loved. They need to feel connected with somebody. And so, you know, I think maybe we stole this from high school, like the 80-20 rule or something. I don't know if this is something you guys
in
do.
It's in communication world, yes.
Yeah, right. It's, hey, telling parents, hey, 80-20 is our goal. 80% of the time, kids are talking. 20% of the time, you're talking. Occasionally, you'll get a parent who, or any leader, but I think it leans a little bit towards older people who want to come and serve in student ministries. I don't know if you've experienced this, Britt, but with parents that want to come in to teach. And it's like, that's... Or
to spy on their kids.
Teach or spy, yes, right? And so it's like, hey, small groups is not for teaching. They don't, especially middle schoolers, they do not need somebody else preaching at me. They listen to me talk too much. That's how I pitch small groups to students. I'm going, come to small groups. You hear me talk about the Bible all the time. Now you get to actually talk about it with your friends. You don't have to just listen to me ramble. And they're like, oh, I can do that. You know, so like, I'll tell leaders that too. You are not here to teach. You're here to ask questions and to kind of show them what it looks like to investigate the Bible, investigate.
We say that with adult leaders too. We have this exact same struggle with adult leaders that feel like, oh, I have a platform now. And it's like, no, small groups is the belonging has to come before believing or becoming. And so I think if they don't feel safe, game over. They're just going to tune out and just come if their parents force them. So you've touched on training. Let's go there. Mm-hmm. So training, gosh, it's a little more complicated for you because you're training, if you're training high schoolers or young adult, college age, or, full adults or grandpas. Like, do you tailor kind of some basic training for everyone of, about the middle school or high school small group, and then you tailor the different pieces, and then and talk to us too about like what are some specific training things that like us as adult leaders, training leaders wouldn't have to cover that you guys have to cover.
Well, when thinking about training middle school and high school leaders, I think student ministries in general, Britt kind of mentioned it earlier, it's messy, right? You have to be willing to step into the mess of lives. And I think the mess of lives of students, the mess of lives of leaders, the mess of our own lives, and being able to just like walk with them through that. And so training, yes, there's some broad picture stuff, but there's also some specifics that are helpful for all people. And so anyways, the passage that comes to mind, Proverbs 14:4 or 4:14, something like that. I've had it written on my whiteboard for a long time. It's a ministry, I think, quote and encouragement for me, but really with small groups, it's applicable. It says, where there are no oxen, the manger is clean, but from the strength of an ox come abundant harvests. And so it's kind of this riddle of a proverb. It's like, hey, if there's no ox, the manger's clean, right? There's no food, there's no poop, there's no crap, there's no mess. It's nice and easy. But if you want abundant harvest, you need ox. And so you need to embrace the mess. And so I think sometimes I've actually even told some leaders this, or not, maybe not our volunteer leaders, but our staff team, saying, hey, if we're not dealing with the mess of students, the mess of leaders, like harvests aren't happening, right? If there's a period of time where it's, man, this has been really easy. It's, maybe there's a little red flag and we're just coasting by and not really embracing the difficulty that stuff comes. So anyways, back to the training stuff. There's some phrases that we've just developed that have been really helpful for us, that for all people. I think the phrase that my old boss used to tell me all the time and has really helped shape us as and our volunteers is, I think it's particular for middle school students. A middle school student will not remember everything you say. They most likely won't remember a single thing that you say. They will remember how you made them feel. When I think back, when I was very involved in middle school ministry at church, I don't remember a single sermon. I don't remember a single conversation. I don't remember a single question and awesome theological answer I got. Like, I just didn't. And those things are good. But man, I remember looking up to guys like John and Josiah and Trent and going, oh, these guys love Jesus.
Yeah, you're small
this is
leaders.
Awesome. Yeah. Right. And so when I think of small group leaders, middle school ministry, I think, man, you don't need to know the answers. These students need to leave and go, these people care about me. Mm-hmm. And that's what's going to make an impact on their lives. So that's a really helpful, I think, training thing that I've always said. I'll jump into another thing that I think can be helpful. And I got this from a ministry called Download Youth Ministry. You can look them up. They're so helpful. You can join their Facebook group. It's been a really bountiful group of wisdom and for me, for thinking through different things. But anyways, they had a guy named Mark Ostreicher, I think. He went by Marco. He wrote this book called 4 Views of Pastoring LGBT Teens. And he shared one time I got this from him, a kind of response to when students come out to you. And this has been so incredibly helpful for us for the last 2 years in particular, with training leaders. Hey, if a student comes out to you as anything in the LGBT spectrum, that is not the conversation. I know people listening, you're going to have a wide variety of theological stances on how you see this and how you interpret this. And I think this is helpful for anybody. But that is, if you are in the traditional camp rather than the affirming camp theologically, that conversation is not the time to say that is sinful. Kids, no, think of a 12-year-old in today's culture. If they're thinking, man, I'm gay, I'm lesbian, I'm trans, the church is probably the last person they want to talk to about this. Right. And so if they finally have the courage to go to a church and go, hey, I want to date a guy, whatever, fill in the blank. Man, if that response is, do you know that's sinful? They go, that's exactly why I didn't want to talk to you. Mm-hmm. Right. And so our conversation kind of is a 4-part response that we've told our leaders. They're really short, so it's easy to memorize. watch me mess it up right now as I talk about it. It's easy to memorize. But the first one I said, all leaders, you need to respond saying, I'm so proud of you. I can't imagine the courage it took for you to tell me that. Right? Talking about the courage, go. Just acknowledge. Man, I'm sure you're really, I don't know what you thought I would respond. And I bet you were terrified to tell me. I'm proud of you. Thank you for coming to talk to me about that. The second spot is, hey, God loves you more than you will ever understand. That's demonstrated through Jesus. Jesus did not die for straight people. He died for all people. And so, man, God loves you. This doesn't change that. Third thing is, I love you. I love you more than you'll understand too. This might change. You might think this is going to change part of our relationship, but man, I love the heck out of you. And the last part is, we want you here. Whether they're a trans student and they're going, well, can I come to camp? You don't have to have an answer in that moment. We want you at this church. We want you coming to every small group. I want you coming every Sunday. I want you coming to every camp, every retreat. We'll figure it out. We want you here. And so we've been kind of walking through our leaders. Hey, that's the 4-part response you need to have with this student. And that beautiful. Has really helped. And if you don't want to, it's painful, it's messy, it's difficult. If you don't want to step into the mess of loving LGBT teens, just handle it poorly. I talked to another pastor. That was their advice. Connor, if you don't want to deal with the stress of this, just handle it poorly one time. And the rumor's going to go around. Oh, Connor, Connor/Calvary/the church. Yeah, they just hate me just like we thought. But if you want to step into the mess and really love kids, I think just responding in a way that's, man, can't imagine how courageous it takes, kind of working through those.
Yeah, I think that would apply to even outside of that particular issue. If it's someone talking about an eating disorder or about struggling with self-harm or cutting or addiction, pornography. I mean, whatever the thing is that they feel is blocking them from being worthy of love and belonging. That whatever that thing is, I think the same for part steps would help that. And actually, that's very transferable to adults too. If someone talks about an abortion they've had, it's loaded and it takes guts to talk about, or, their addictions. I think to approach it with kindness. I mean, that those 4 steps come from Jesus. Pretty much did it. So, and to reinforce that, we want you here. We're not afraid of the mess. We're embracing it because it's you. You're far more than your secret or your mess. So I love that. Those are great handles.
And the last thing I'll say about that too, I learned this quickly. We trained with that response, and we had a student come out, and then it stopped there. Right? It's a nice, easy 4-part response, but then
you have to walk with
died, it. And then we kind of just almost ignored it because it was easy to in this circumstance. And so, kind of the next thing I'd say is step 5. You don't train leaders in this. It's not a memorized response, but it's keep walking with them. Keep saying, hey, how do you feel? How are you comfortable here? What pronouns do you want me to say? And talking with your leadership at your church before this happens about what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, and where's your church stand on that? Because obviously you need to honor your leadership at your any context, but continue walking with those students, continue to have the tough conversations, and just ask a million questions and help the students kind of process as we're going, hey, we're going to pursue Jesus together. Let's talk about this. So.
Yeah, and you will grow in the process.
Hey, all you awesome small group point people out there. Jason Banzoff here, Group Talk producer, and I'm interrupting here to there to talk to you about huddles. Let me ask you a question. You want everyone in your church to be part of a small group, right? The answer is obviously yes. Now, one more question. What do you say when someone says they don't have a small group they're looking for? You start one, right? Well, at the Small Group Network, we want everyone to be part of a huddle. And if there isn't one in your area, why don't you start one? There are other small group point people looking for the exact same thing. Visit smallgroupnetwork.com/huddles to find huddles that are in your area, or if your area needs one. Now back to here to there.
Right. Is there anything specific that you train towards that's unique to high school?
Yeah, I think when Connor was talking, one of the things that just came to my mind was the fact that for me, I help run a huge ministry where it's one of those moments where I may not know every single person that is in my high school at the moment, or even just in our small groups. And it's a comfort for me to realize that I know that there's some leader in there that knows every single student intimately. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, then how do I empower my small group leaders to catch the vision that we have, like sharing those 4 steps and really equipping them? Because I know that for us, when we have a college age student come and jump into this, it could be daunting. It could be sometimes they don't know how to step into the messiness of small groups in student ministries and whatnot. And so for me, as a kind of the facilitator of it all, I really want to empower them in like, what are the next steps for you? And I think one of the things that I always have to remind them is that you get this burden, this weight of being a pastoral voice in these students' lives, but you're not their therapist.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's understanding the line and the tension of, what do you say? What can you provide? But also knowing that maybe you're not a licensed therapist. And so there's a moment where you might have to come to one of us, one of the leaders, and empowering that it's okay if you need advice from us. Like, this is never a moment where in August, right before small groups happen, we have like this whole training for all of our small group leaders and kind of going through logistically like what small groups looks like. And I know that with COVID things changed and whatnot, and I'm so thankful for having leaders who are flexible in that. But I think it could easily have that training in August and then just never interact with the small group leaders. Right. Which
you'll have no leaders the following August.
Right. And so for me, it's like being an open book and being honest and just really continuing to check in with my leaders, empowering them with things. Yes. So one might come and say, you know what, I have a student who's dealing with eating disorders. What can I do? And for me, it's this moment where I can model and like, well, I'm not an expert in it, but do you know who is? Or here's a book that I recommend, or have you had them talk to their parents about this? And so for me, it's like, okay, my role in this is empowering the leaders so that they can go and catch vision to empower their students. And I think for high schoolers, it's a little bit different because they're more independent in the way that they're thinking. It's also interesting to interact with students who their parents aren't believers.
Right.
And just navigating hard, difficult things.
Yeah, that would be, because then they have to shape what they're telling their parents, and maybe they can't share some things. So how do you deal with the confidentiality of they're minors, but they're also telling you
not my kids.
They're not your kid. I know. So that gets like really messy. I think if I was to lead a student small group, which thankfully God has not called me to, because I think I would just be so petrified. I'm intimidated by teenagers. I barely got my kids through teenage years.
Loud and clear, you're leading a 6th grade girls group.
This is what's happening. This is what God's. But I think part of the fear and intimidation is that like I don't want to mess it up, and as a parent to be like, oh my gosh, I know now something about your kid, like that I can't share. But then do you need to know it? Like, I think some of that training probably needs to go on if you have like an adult parent or an older person, a different generation who is used to certain things. I think that would make things even messier, not just on the kid side, but on the leader side. And as you guys equip leaders, that's that piece of it of trying to pay attention to some of that and not gossiping outside to the, hey, your kid's in my small group. How cool. Hey, so your family's kind of a mess these days. You know, like what? How? Obviously, they wouldn't do that, but like, maybe some people might think that was okay out of care and concern for that family. I could totally see that happening.
Or even with leaders, I know that for us this year, we've had a moment where a student was sexually assaulted and had the courage again to go to their leader and share that. And the interesting part was that leader also had experienced that. When they were younger. And so it's this moment where they had to step into this role of, she kind of said, I want to be someone who I didn't have in this moment.
Wow.
And then having to shepherd her because, I mean, I could only imagine the things that might be brought up with being reminded about these things. And so I think it's one of those moments where when we look for leaders, I'm looking for people who are flexible, but then also willing to be vulnerable themselves.
Yeah, the wounded healers.
Yeah.
You know, and where the leader's not going to center their experience and say, well, I went through that. Let me tell you what, you know, but they can be present with them in a unique way because of their personal experience.
And more often than not, I've had so many people when they come and they want to serve, they've had a really hard time in high school. So there's some sort of way that they were like, I know what it feels like not to belong. I know what it feels like to be an outcast or to be hurt within the high school, middle school realm. So I want to come and serve and be kind of the solution, if not a stepping stone for a student not to
That's
have
beautiful.
to experience what they experienced in their own.
Oh, so maybe I do need to do 6th grade. Dang, I might have to. That my place of wounding. Middle school is my place of wounding, so I might have to go there to
most
to
people,
make sure.
wounded in middle school.
But at the same time, that's the time of greatest spiritual dependence on Jesus, because I didn't belong anywhere else. I think so. You kind of have both together, right? An opportunity.
Yeah. Kind of going with what Britt's saying, I think it's really important. It's incredibly important what you're saying, so that leaders feel supported.
Yeah.
They're not out on doing something by themselves. One, to protect them from pride of thinking that they're Jesus, because that happens.
Right.
And that's a really painful situation when you have to talk with the leader and say, hey, this is your identity. Your identity is a child of God.
Right.
You're not serving students or serving me. You're serving Jesus by loving students and talking with them that. But then also, to be able to help with when the difficult stuff happens, and to recognize, like me and Britt, like kind of what you're just saying, like not that we're going to have every solution. We had, I think it was 6th grade guys group, where every single week for this entire past year, it was, hey guys, how was group tonight? But, we meet on Wednesday nights, and at the end, it was always like, Connor, it happens. For so long, they were just really crazy, man. We only got to, half the questions. We only kind of read this one verse, and man, it was really crazy. Week after week after week, and dealing with some of the difficult students and kind of saying, hey, do this, or like giving some tips and advice to kind of control the rowdy crew. And so kind of helping them through from the beginning to the end. And even I actually had them meet with some of our 8th grade leaders that said, hey, look, meet with these guys. They have 8th graders, and they were saying the same thing to me 2 years ago. But then also so that when messy situations come up, when at the very second to last small group of the year, prayer requests, and a kid goes, I've been having some suicidal thoughts, so just pray for me. And it was like, and they were already running late, so they had to pray and then leave, and they came to me, Connor, what do we do? And I said, all right, perfect. Man, I was so proud. Like, first thing, you guys created a culture where a student could share that, you struggled this whole year for this moment to love this kid. And it is not you to be his counselor. It's not even me to be his counselor. I ended up calling the family, talking with them. And even a couple of days ago, I was on the phone with the mom again, and the kid's in counseling and just thriving now and being able to open up with some of the painful things of being adopted at a young age that the leaders never knew. Anyways, like, the fact that leaders can know they're cared for by us, and it's a team effort, and that we also are being cared for by our supervisors, our staff, and just other people. This isn't some isolated thing of just good luck, go be with some 12-year-old.
Yeah. And for me, I experienced that the first year I stepped into small groups, a lot of, with the freshmen, especially, they're just like, we talked about one question and maybe that was it. And they just felt so defeated as leaders. And so the second year around, I kind of made this like 3-pillar thing where I was like, if you do these 3 things, whatever the rest of the 45 minutes looks like, you were successful in small group that night. And so one of them was like, open up your Bible and read the word. Nice. It was prayer and answer one question.
I love it.
That's it. That's it. And I think it really changed the morale of our leaders being like, okay, we answered one question.
Right.
We opened up the Bible and we prayed for each other.
Yeah.
And that was a win.
And if content is what's going to change hearts, there's so many places you can get content.
Exactly.
And you also have, you have services where there's content. And I know, Britt, in high school, you guys use sermon-based curriculum that you write and you provide questions for, and that works really well because you're primarily trying to build relationships, especially with the unchurched kids. And I know, Connor, you guys have tried different curriculum. Just really quickly, because I know we're running out of time, what are some key pieces you look for in curriculum that you think works for middle school? I know a ton of questions will not work. And a deep dive into the, Greek and Hebrew probably would not work.
Oh, yeah.
But what?
Which we have had a leader this couple months ago. They walked in with the Bible passage we were reading printed off in 10 different translations. So everyone could analyze. And I was like, okay, let's take a step back here. Sorry, distraction. Curriculum. Yeah, we've tried a couple different things. We used Orange for a while. I love Orange's company. They have some really great resources. We used XP3. But then we started looking at some things I didn't love about it for our context. And so now we use Grow curriculum, which I have really enjoyed. I think there's a little bit of pride to me that wants to say I can just write my own questions. But I think the understanding like, that's not my strong suit, and recognizing what I love most about the curriculum that we use is it's going to hit topics that I'm not going to think of.
Right.
And sometimes there's some stuff where it's like, whoa, I would not have gone this was something we need to talk about, and it provides this really fruitful conversation.
And it gives you also a scope and sequence for those developmental years, which I think is a little different in high school. High school is a little bit less. So that I can see that being really helpful, having a structure.
Yeah, and what's helpful for me too is I'm not spending 40 hours a week writing curriculum.
Well, we don't spend 40 hours a week writing curriculum, Connor. Like,
no, okay. I'm not saying you guys do that, but I'm just saying it frees up needs and the rest of our staff to be able to go meet with leaders and care for them that way.
Yeah, and the kids.
Yeah, and so they anyways, no. So I love Grow. I look for, are they opening the Bible? For me, sometimes curriculums for student ministries, especially middle school, sometimes they really try to force the Bible into small groups, which I really don't like. There's a question where it's like, read this Bible passage, and then the next 10 questions are like somewhat related to one word that, we're going to like, this is the topic and the theme. And it's like, okay, sometimes it gets a little wacky for me, a little too much. And I try to go, okay, are we going to read the Bible and actually ask questions about the Bible? Those are really good and be able to work through that. But I totally would recommend Grow curriculum. It's really helpful with Kenny and Elle.
Yeah, very cool. All right. So as we wind down, I want to give you guys opportunity to share something fun you've done with your small groups that you think just to share. Maybe one of our listeners would like to try it.
For our high school ministry small groups at the end of the year, we always do something called affirmations. And so it's the very last small group that they spend affirming each other in the group and including the leader. And so basically the premise is that the leader starts and affirms a student. And what's really powerful is that we ask for everyone when they affirm it to actually look at the person, talk to them. It's not a third person moment, but they get to affirm them. And sometimes for students, that's the first time they've ever affirmed someone else. And so a leader will step in, model that, and then we have 2 other students jump in. And then once we affirmed, because of course, if we had everyone affirm everyone in the group, we'd be there until the next day. And so we have 3 people affirm that student. And then we have the student get into the middle of the circle. We pray over that student. And then that student who is affirmed will then go affirm somebody else. And then that continues on. And it's really cool to see, as a leader who's done it for a few years, the relationships that happen beyond just my knowledge and understanding. Sometimes I'm like, oh, wait, those 2 are friends? Like, I would have never pegged them to be. And so to hear them affirm each other and see and call out gifts and just beautiful things about their friendships and whatnot, it's really encouraging as a leader to hear that Jesus is working even when I don't see it.
So how do you have fun with middle schoolers? I know it's kind of...
You gotta have fun. You gotta have a lot of fun. Just a couple thoughts on that. Ask other people what is fun. Ask students what is fun.
Yes.
I can have a bunch of ideas. Trying to think of a fun thing for an 11-year-old sometimes works. A lot of times it flops. And so asking students what they think is fun, asking leaders what they think is fun. And I think also planning something. This might sound like we're lying. Planning something that seems spontaneous later and acting like it's like what's an example? I just know I'm thinking Britt and I were talking about our high school or our 8th grade transition day. We always do like a day where the middle school and high school team and middle school leaders and high school leaders come and hang out with the 8th grade class.
The handoff.
Yes, the handoff to high school. And one of like the best parts of that day is when the high school pastor looks around to some kid and goes, hey, do you want some coffee, man? Like, I'm kind of getting tired. It's this long day. And he goes, oh, yeah, like that'd be pretty cool. He's like, do you think we should go to Starbucks? And I'm like, oh, really? And then he'll turn to me, and then I'll be the bad guy. Because for middle schoolers, no, we don't do coffee, but now they're high schoolers now.
Oh, that's so cute.
He'll turn to me and he'll go, hey, should we go to Starbucks? And I'll be like, no, dude, I don't think we have the time. And then he'll go, we're going to Starbucks. It's on me. And it's this planned thing, but it looks like, no way, we're going to Starbucks. That's so fun. And then they go to Starbucks and we buy Starbucks for all of them. It's already
so now Connor's no longer cool, and now they've been passed off to a cooler guy. That's so brilliant.
No,
caffeinated.
Caffeinated too. And then you send them home that way. That's so brilliant.
Well, I think there is something to really willing to embarrass yourself, willing to take risks and trying fun things. some things aren't going to be fun. That's okay. But telling leaders, asking them what they think is fun, because sometimes you will get really good ideas and sometimes you'll get really bad ideas. I had one group, some kids kind of came up to me after the end of the year small group party, and they were like, hey, I was like, oh, what'd you guys do? They're like, our fun idea was Bible trivia. And I'm like,
oh my God, this is me. This is what I would do.
For a 13-year-old, they were like,
that was what my church did.
And we saw the other group and they went, got ice cream. And I was like, oh, so trying to have some equitable, fun ideas for them. And,
so perfect.
But yeah, planning dumb things, asking kids, we take a vote on, do you want to go? I always try to get kids to go on a hike because it's free and no kids ever want to do it. But, should we go bonding to the trampoline park nearby? Should we go to the mini golf place?
And I know you guys build fun night, free night into your small group curriculum because I see that pop up where it's like, this is a free night. And then you give them some guidance so they don't go off and just drink 5 cups of coffee.
Yeah. And for middle school, we try to make a list, like 10 different fun games that you can play at the beginning of small groups. The first 20 minutes, especially for COVID, we were like, you better be having fun with these kids.
Yes.
They don't see anybody, so the first 10 minutes, just laugh together.
Yes.
And then that helps you then later in the day try to break down the barriers to have difficult conversations, because that's the goal. That kids are responsive to hear the gospel, to ask the difficult things, to talk about some of the messy things that we've talked about. And a lot of that stems from, can I laugh with these people? Can I laugh at the leader and him not get mad at me? And some of those things. So
so basically
fun's good.
It is really good. You guys are doing an awesome job creating those environments. Thank you so much for your input. So I have to apologize for that crack I made about millennials because you guys obviously do know everything. So I was wrong. So if you're a millennial listening to this, some of my best ideas come from millennials. And I love having the two of you and other young people on our staff, because really it's so refreshing. And you bring fresh ideas and fresh thoughts. So I'm hoping our listeners picked up some of those as well, and certainly your enthusiasm. And it's funny because it's an audio. It'll be interesting because they'll probably kind of have a very distinctive voice, and you've referenced being big. So I will have to attach a picture. And if you want to get in touch, if you would like to talk further, we have a small group network page this will upload onto, as well as wherever you get your podcast. And I'll kind of include you guys on there just for the little bit of time. You don't have to hang out there for long, but you are an adult small group leader, so you actually could hang out there longer. Where if people have any questions, thank you for being willing to be available and answering some of those. And I can put your email addresses on the show notes as well if they have anything specific about middle school or high school small groups. And this was so fun, you guys. I knew it would be. And we went so long, and now you can tell the other people on staff that we're podcasters now. Go tell your bosses we're podcasters now. We've made it.
I'm surprised I made it through without making a fart joke. Kind of disappointed in myself, but hey, we'll move on.
All right. Well, since you referenced it, I think that makes you a bona fide middle school pastor.
Yes. Okay.
So thank you all for listening to Here to There. And until next time, remember, we are better together.
Thank you for listening to Group Talk. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast through iTunes and get new episodes downloaded automatically. Also, if you enjoy this program, please take a few minutes to give us a positive rating on iTunes so that other small group point people can find us more easily. We encourage you to visit our website at smallgroupnetwork.com to access our library of free resources, connect to a huddle with other small group ministry leaders in your area, read our blog articles, or join us on our Facebook group. Don't forget to use the hashtag SGNet when engaging with your social media channels. Thank you for your support.